I believe George Pickens is in for another top 10 performance, while Vinnie is all in on Jaden Reed bouncing back this week. We dig into and debate our Week 8 wide receiver and tight end rankings on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen every day. We truly appreciate it. We're here Monday through Friday, every day, trying to help you win your fantasy championships. Please hit that subscribe button if you're on YouTube. If you're not, go check us out on YouTube. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. If you are a new listener, I am one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and a fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
Yeah, welcome to all our new listeners. I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting over at sportingnews.com. Check us out there in print online as you do here on the airways of YouTube or wherever you get your podcast.
Yes. Now, as always, on Thursdays, we discuss our wide receiver and tight end rankings. We already hit on our running back and quarterback rankings yesterday. So if you missed that, you can go check it out after this episode. To start right off the top here with our top wide receivers, we're very similar at the top. No surprise that we both have Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, AJ Brown, CeeDee Lamb, all high this week. We're also believing in Tyreek Hill to make that comeback with Tua now back out there. But the one guy I really want to discuss is Jaden Reed, because you have him all the way as your wide receiver 8 this week. Amazing matchup against the Jaguars, but Jaden Reed hasn't been doing anything. I mean, as finished as the wide receiver 25 or worse in 5 of the last 6 weeks. So why do you have trust in Jaden Reed this week?
Yeah, I just think you look at some of the recent numbers. I mean, he was off to a gangbuster start, and partly because we had other injuries and things were happening. Romeo Doubs missed that one game, and then you had Christian Watson slowly nursing back to health, and he was kind of the star of the show. But finally, you get a matchup where you can just feed the alpha, where I think what's been going on with Jordan Love, he's been good in terms of, okay, he's throwing interceptions early, but then he's picking out the matchup he likes the best, right? Well, in this game against the Jaguars, all the matchups are good. So I think they recognize that Jaden Reed has been kind of quiet as well. I think his guys are Reed and Doubs as we go forward, and a little bit of Tucker Kraft on the side, right? Christian Watson is a flash guy, so is Dontavian Wicks. But these are the core guys that you're looking at in this passing game and separating a little bit. So I think they need to kind of get the greasy wheel squeaking again, right? Or however you want to say it. But Jaden Reed is the guy that kind of is the engine of the offense, and I think they'll also get him some opportunities, maybe get him out of the slump, give him a carry or two, right? Just get him a little bit into the flow of the game. I know he's a little bit banged up, but you got to unleash one of your better weapons, and this will help early because the Packers are tired of these wild games that there's slow starts by Jordan Love, and there's interceptions, and it comes down to the wire. They shouldn't do that this week. They need to go with their playmakers, and I think when you've seen early with their positive game scripts, that's when Jaden Reed has done his best, not in these games where Jordan Love has to go wild, throwing 50 times to a bunch of guys looking for matchups.
Yeah, if Jordan Love could just eliminate all these interceptions, he'd be such a good fantasy quarterback.
Crazy. He'd be one on the board.
He needs to eliminate those. He should against the Jaguars. But we talked about he's my quarterback 1 on the week this week. Jordan Love is.
And also
now, my wide receiver 8 is Drake London. You're with me here, loving him this week at wide receiver 10. Mm-hmm. We just saw him destroy this Buccaneers secondary, but he's been great. He's been getting the targets, and him and Kirk Cousins have really been connecting. So keep starting him. But also another guy we both agree on is we both have Cooper Kupp as our wide receiver 7 this week. He plays on Thursday Night Football. Well, if he doesn't get traded before then, it's like 5 hours away from the game. So I think we might be okay. But against the Vikings, a really friendly matchup to fantasy wide receivers. And Cooper Kupp, I mean, when he was healthy, was on fire. It was a short time. But Cooper Kupp we love this week. But what about Puka Nacua if he plays?
Yeah, this is a tougher one. I don't think there's going to be any limitations with Cooper Kupp because there was that rumbling earlier. Are they going to put him on a snap count? The Rams need to win games here. And the thing that's different about the Rams being sub 500 is this division is suddenly looking up for grabs, right? The Seahawks are a decent first place team, but they're not unbeatable. They're playing the Bills this week. And then the 49ers are going through their share of injury issues. So the Rams totally can't give up on the season. They need to get their passing game going. The Vikings do give it up to wide receivers, but I think Nacua has just been on a slower timetable in general, right? There's been a trajectory where, Kupp is going to be back around this time where Nacua had the knee injury and then it was a disaster, right? Where he had to keep staying on the shelf. So my gut is he's not playing. And if he does play, it's going to be limited snaps. The other issue they're dealing with is Jordan Whittington is missing the game with a shoulder injury. So they're pretty thin at wide receiver. So that might mean more. But they also have Tyler Johnson and Tutu Atwell and Demarcus Robinson to handle that kind of role, right? Where Kupp is more unique and they have to get him in the lineup. So I think they might wait one more week on Nacua. Same thing on the other side. The feeling is that TJ Hawkinson, even though he could be activated from IR, I think they're going to probably wait a week here. It's maybe just trying to rush these guys too fast. And we'll know well before the game because they both need to be activated a few hours before, even before they announce the inactives.
Yeah, I'm kind of hoping Puka just doesn't play because I'm going to have to make that decision if he plays, and it's going to be a headache. And if you don't start him, he's going to play the whole game and go off. And then if you start him, he's going to play like 5 snaps and do nothing. So it's a really hard decision. And obviously, I would still play Puka if you have like low end wide receiver 3s that you're just hoping has a big day. Then you play Puka. But if you have these guys that have been performing week in and week out, don't get cute and start Puka over them because you just never know how much he's going to play tonight. Now, also, I want to move to Devonte Adams because we both have him ranked relatively high compared to what he's done this whole season, honestly, when healthy, but then what he did in his first game with the Jets. So I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. I'm putting him at wide receiver 11. You have him right close to me at wide receiver 14. He had 9 targets last week in his first game back with Aaron Rodgers with the Jets, but only 3 receptions, 30 yards.
Yeah,
it's
that was
got to get better this week, right?
Yeah, that was a tough matchup against the Steelers. We know that. And they were a bit rusty. They can talk about how they just could pick up their chemistry, but I think their biggest concern was getting Aaron Rodgers to move in Devonte Adams to live until he figured out his thing in New York. It kind of focused on just the newness of it all and maybe forcing the action. Where this week they don't really have to force it because they're facing the Patriots, and the Patriots can be pretty vulnerable. We saw it last week against the Jaguars where Brian Thomas Jr. had his way. So I think this is a good game for both Adams and Garrett Wilson. So I think they both go off in this game rather well, but they are going to cut into each other's production. But the good thing about the Patriots, I don't think they have guys who can cover either. Their best corner might be inside here with Marcus Jones. And then you have Anderson Jones, who's probably on the trade block here. So not playing all that well. They've been average at corner. So I think this is the game where they're going to say, look, we need to unleash Rodgers with the receivers. Then we'll turn it over to Breece Hall, Braylon Allen, this running game to win. So I think they build a big lead and then turn it over. And again, Adams, I think there's a very good chance he and Wilson find the end zone this week.
Yeah, I think at least Adams will have a good game. I'm a little bit more worried about Wilson, who, I still have Wilson ranked as a wide receiver 2. I have him at 20. You have him at 14. So you actually 13. Sorry. You actually have Wilson one spot ahead of Adams. So you do like them a lot both this week.
Yeah.
But I'm just a little bit more worried about Garrett Wilson in general moving forward. Yeah. They could both have a good game in this matchup. We both like Brian Thomas Jr. I like him a bit more than you, but that's every single week. But he's been killing it. Top 9 wide receiver in 3 of the last 4 weeks. Just keep plugging him in. But the one guy that we're different about that I want to hit on, it's George Pickens. And it's not like we're drastically different, but I have him all the way up at wide receiver 9 this week. He finished as a top 3 wide receiver in his first game with Russell Wilson. And you're a little bit lower on him at wide receiver 20. I thought you were going to be with me this week and have him as a top 10 guy. Just seeing how dominant those two were together and how Russ just is willing to just throw it up for George Pickens. The Giants are allowing the 3rd highest catch percentage to wide receivers. They suck against play action in the deep ball. Those are what Russell Wilson shines in. He's going to hit George Pickens this week.
Yeah, I just don't see him needing to have a big game, right? The Giants' run defense has got some issues, and if they can win with the running game and defense, Mike Tomlin's dream, right? Just tee off on the guy with the pass rush, run the ball, just pull away from a team. Now, so I think if George Pickens gets it, it's going to have to be early in this game. I just think the Giants are probably going to know this, and unfortunately, they haven't been able to pick up a second receiver yet. Maybe it's Cooper Kupp on the way. Who knows? But they're going to have some coverage kind of roll over to him. That's not saying that they can't connect, right? Wilson and Pickens connected no matter what last week, even when there was a guy on him. So I just don't know if they're going to need him, and I think it maybe comes down to the fact that I'm not sure he'll be in position to score this week. So maybe that's the difference we have. And usually it is, right? When we go from wide receiver 1 to wide receiver 2, comes down to the touchdown. I don't see it necessarily coming to fruition this week, only because, again, they should run all over the Giants and all the way through the red zone.
I think that's fair, that if the Giants offense can't do anything, Mike
Yeah,
Tomlin's
I'm
gonna
a little
wanna
worried.
run it and play
Yeah.
it safe. I'm still gonna stick with my wide receiver
Yeah.
9. I still think they're
Yeah.
gonna have some big plays, but you're right, it comes down to that touchdown
It does
or
almost guarantees he finishes as like wide receiver 15. That's what
yes.
happens right in between. So either way, he's a great play this week. You have to have him in your lineup going forward with Wilson.
No, we have another big game this week against the Eagles and the Bengals. T. Higgins has been killing it. He's easily in your lineup, but DeVonta Smith had a really, really bad game. I mean, negative
Oh
points
gosh.
last week. So we're gonna hit on it for trusting him in this upcoming matchup. News flash, or giving it away a little bit, but we're trusting him. I will get to all of that right after a quick break. This episode is brought to you by Z-Biotics. Z-Biotics is a pre-alcohol probiotic drink. It's the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's that byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces as an enzyme to break down this product down so you don't feel sick the next morning. So before you drink, this is what you do. The night before, or not the night before, but the night that you're drinking, you take the pre-alcohol Z-Biotic before taking a drink. After that, when you're drinking, obviously pace yourself. Don't get crazy. Hydrate and get a good night's sleep. And then you get to wake up tomorrow enjoying your day because Z-Biotics works. Go to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use the code LockedOnNFL at checkout. Z-Biotics is backed with 100% money back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money. No questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com. That's ZBIOTICS.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code LockedOnNFL at checkout for 15% off. All right, getting into Devonta Smith. It's a high scoring predicted matchup, right? It should be. Eagles versus the Bengals. They both have good quarterbacks. They both have great wide receivers. Devonta Smith last week ends as the wide receiver 100 in fantasy, which is just hilarious. But does he bounce back this week? I think he does.
Yeah, you look at the corners for the Bengals, they've really kind of been up and down and given up some big plays as well. They've got an interesting trio, right? And Devonta Smith can be moved around. You'll see Mike Hilton probably in the slot a few times. But when you look at overall, I think Cam Taylor-Britt, we know he's been a little bit mercurial in coverage and things have been breaking down at times. So this is a really good match for Devonta Smith. Last week, what happened with the Eagles game? They made it a point to be all about Saquon Barkley in the running game, this revenge game against the Giants. Well, yeah, they'll run Saquon this week, but you know how Saquon is. Big game, quieter game. When we think he's going to have a big game, I think he'll still be solid, but this game is going to be a little bit more high scoring. We just talked about the Giants, right? And worried about how much are the Steelers going to throw there in that matchup. Well, the Eagles are underdogs in this game, and their offense might need to get going here because I think the Bengals can exploit them. So that means Jalen Hurts is going to put the ball up more. And when that happens, there's no Dallas Goedert in the lineup now. So it's going to be a lot about A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, interchangeable plays. You figure the coverage will roll towards A.J. Brown. So it's going to be more of a typical Eagles passing game. They haven't looked great. I'll say this: Jalen Hurts has been up and down. I know he's compiling and putting up numbers for fantasy. He's been off passing, but the one thing he's done well is throw the deep ball, and I think they'll have some opportunities playing off the run in this game as well.
Yeah, I have Smith all the way at wide receiver 13 this week.
Yeah.
Actually, you do. I have him at 19. I mixed
Okay.
that up, but I still really like DeVonta Smith
Yeah.
this week. There's just some guys that have, that I feel a little bit more confident in, but he's going to get the targets. He's going to get the yards. It's not going to be another -2 receiving yard day for DeVonta Smith. Another wide receiver that's been struggling for a lot longer than DeVonta Smith. It's Jaylen Waddle. We talked about how we're fully trusting Tyreek Hill this week. We both have him as a top 6 wide receiver with Tua back under center. But what about the other Dolphins wide receiver, Jaylen Waddle? His one game he got to play with Tua this year is pretty good. 5 receptions, 109 receiving yards. You'd be happy with that. And he gets the Cardinals, who have been up and down on defense, but have allowed the 7th most fantasy points to wide receivers this year. You throwing in Jaylen Waddle. We both have him as our wide receiver 21 this week.
Yeah, I'm just ahead of Amari Cooper. And the reason I have Amari Cooper a little bit lower is because the matchup is a little bit tougher with the Seahawks and having Devin Witherspoon there that can maybe take him away on side. But here, you look at Jaylen Waddle, and the Cardinals' corners have been pretty weak all year long. I mean, they were fortunate last week that the Chargers basically had no one there. I mean, they had Ladd McConkey, but they didn't have Quentin Johnson. They had to throw their tight ends and try to beat the Cardinals. That way, we know the Cardinals, again, have been improved against the tight end. Well, that means it's not good for Jonas Smith. It means fire up Jaylen Waddle here a lot here with Tua back. So if Tyreek Hill is going to return to normal and Devin Achane can go off again, I would say at home, Jaylen Waddle should also perform. So I think the Dolphins will unleash their typical offense. I don't know if I even have them too low at 21 based on the Dolphins kind of being eager to do this. So let's see how it goes here with Tua. But again, just throw out everything you've seen without Tua. Because Mike McDaniel, all of a sudden, he'll look like a genius again. If he wasn't a true genius, just saying, they would have figured out how to move the ball a little bit better without his starting quarterback.
Yeah, I can't believe how bad it's been. And it'll be truly impressive if Tua comes back and it just is amazing again. But it should be way better so you can play both of these guys and Devin Achane and all the superstars in that offense. Now, a guy we thought was going to be a superstar right off the bat and has not been whatsoever is Marvin Harrison Jr. I pushed him
Whoa.
all the way down to wide receiver 42
Whoa.
this week. The Dolphins have allowed the fewest points per game to wide receivers this season. And honestly, that's a nice ranking for him, right? Because in his last 3 games, wide receiver 59, 103. Now he left that game very early with a concussion, but then wide receiver 58 last week. So his 2 fully healthy games, wide receiver 59 and 58. He's had 1 good quarter this year. That is it. I have to move him down. You have him at wide receiver 29. You also have him low. I'm keeping him on my bench this week, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm hoping that you're reverse jinxing him because
I hope so too. I hope so too.
Because I need him to come through pretty badly here in one team where my wide receivers have been good and I have been manufacturing good production here, but he's a key to what I was doing here in my draft. Is like I wanted him to go off early as wide receiver 1, where other guys have outproduced him that I took behind him. So I want him to get going. Like the talent is there. I don't know. This is kind of ridiculous that they don't scheme things open for him as much as they should, especially when you have now clearly you have other people, but they always had to get Greg Dortch involved. You got to get Greg Dortch the ball. If it's not Trey McBride, where's Dortch? Where's Dortch? Let's get him the ball. Like, get Marvin Harrison Jr. wherever you're lining up Dortch. He's a bigger guy that can have quickness, and he's a good red zone guy. So I don't get it. He's got a lot of talent. Maybe we're overestimating his talent. I don't know. Like maybe his mindset is not always there
I
to
feel
go
like
out.
Kyler Murray needs to get like Russell and just throw him the ball.
Yeah,
even when
throw
he
him the
doesn't
ball.
look
Like I
perfect.
don't know what's going on here. There shouldn't have been, and it started out so well, which is also puzzling, right? Yeah, I get it, but normally hope here. I'm going to give us a little bit of hope here, Michelle. The Dolphins with Hill and Waddle and Achane will go up big. Kyler Murray will have to chuck a ton. Their corners will ease off, and then you'll get Marvin Harrison go off in garbage time. So that's what we need. Stop playing good defense, Cardinals. Play bad defense, lose, and then you'll get Marvin Harrison to get some points in the second half.
Yeah. Now, these are some options that we like over Marvin Harrison Jr. Because if I'm telling you to sit him, you're like, well, who do I play over him? Well, these are all guys that you could have got from the waiver wire this year or even just this week, or you drafted them super, super late. So that's Romeo Dobbs. He gets a great matchup against the Jaguars, has been getting the targets, his finishes, the wide receiver 9 and 14 over the last 2 weeks. You got Juwan Jennings, if he plays this week against the Cowboys without Brandon Ayuk there, maybe without Debo, maybe without George Kittle. Cedric Tillman against the Ravens, who gets his first opportunity last week and has a great week. Or Darnell Mooney, who has been up and down, but he's been heavily utilized in this Falcons offense. And, he gets the Buccaneers, who have been just giving away fantasy points to wide receivers. We actually have all 4 of these guys as top 32 plays this week.
Yeah, I mean, you got to love all their matchups, and Dubs can crush it. Jennings, we saw what he did last time when they had a lot of issues because Brock Purdy trusts him, and you'll pepper him with a ton of targets. Cedric Tillman gets quarterback help here against a really bad Ravens secondary that's giving up the most points to wide receivers. So Tillman's the best receiver for the Browns that are going to be trailing. That should add up to a good day for Tillman. Darnell Mooney's just been fantastic. We know he had the big game against the Buccaneers secondary the first time. So even if he has half of that, he'll be happy. And one more guy I want to mention in that group, and we talked about Brian Thomas. I also like Christian Kirk a little bit this week, and actually Calvin Ridley, because you have Christian Kirk working the middle of the field. The Packers are kind of weak at nickel corner, that you can exploit them a little bit. So I do like Kirk maybe getting more involved now that Thomas has become a bigger threat. And then you look at one more guy in that same mix with all these guys. Ridley, look, DeAndre Hopkins is not there. This matchup for the Titans is against the Lions. It's a really bad secondary as well. They should be trailing. So if Calvin Ridley does not get volume here from hopefully Mason Rudolph and produce, like Calvin Ridley is a bust for 2 straight years. Like maybe we just have to say whatever that year off from the Falcons was, he just didn't put it together, and that's it.
Yeah, I don't have high hopes for Calvin Ridley, but Mason Rudolph can chuck it up.
Yeah, that's what we need. Just chuck it to him. Just get the ball to these guys. They're waiting for it. And that's a part of the problem. You have to really look at the quarterbacks too in a lot of these situations.
And there is a quarterback change in Cleveland, and that's why I love this one tight end named David Njoku this week. So we're going to get into our tight end rankings. We are different on Njoku. We're going to debate about that for a hot second to start our tight end talk, but we'll get into all of that to end today's episode right after a quick break.
This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. There is a game to start the NFL Week 8. It's technically the halfway point of the season here as we get to Thursday and the first action of the week. We know who's playing. It's the Vikings and the Rams, Justin Jefferson and Cooper Kupp, Aaron Jones and Kyron Williams. A lot of good fantasy stuff as well. I do like the Vikings to go in there and win, rebound from that tough loss to the Lions last week. They should take care of business. Their defense, I think, will force turnovers there, but also you could have a chance for the over as well. So that's where I'm going here with FanDuel this week, going with the over and the Vikings to cover. You can start getting into the second half action with America's #1 sportsbook. That's only FanDuel. When you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can also check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. So easy to get in the action. And FanDuel is wanting to get in the action now because you get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's only at FanDuel.com. FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, Michelle, let's get into our tight end rankings to close the show. We did tease a very interesting battle with David Njoku here, and the one guy I really debated between is him and Dalton Kincald. So where do you have it, David Njoku, this week?
I have him at tight end 5, and honestly, I want to move him up. Like, I want him higher. It's hard because I think George Kittle, if he plays, is going to be a focal point of the offense. We know Brock Bowers is a focal point. Travis Kelce with, I know DeAndre Hopkins is making his first start. Focal point. Trey McBride, it's not Marvin Harrison. It's Trey McBride. Focal point. And it's just like those 4 guys are so great, right? So it's hard to get him over them. You also agree. You have all of those 4, Bowers, Kittle, McBride, and Kelce in your top 5 as well. But Njoku, you have down at 10. And I mean, he got 14 targets last
Yeah.
week, right? It took Jameis Winston one drive to find David Njoku his first touchdown of the season, because Jameis Winston is such a better quarterback than Deshaun Watson right now. And Njoku finishes with 76 yards, a touchdown, finishes the tight end 2 last week. I just think he's going to continue to be that focal point for the Ravens. And the Ravens are allowing the 6th most points to tight ends this season. So it's not like they're a scary matchup.
Yeah, I mean, there's actually a lot of tight ends with good matchups this week. I'll just say that. I mean, I really like Evan Ingram as well against the Packers. Talk about inside work in the middle of the field with Kirk. I do have Ingram all the way up at 4, so he's my David Njoku of this week, if you want to call it that. And then I have Kyle Pitts, who's really been solid since that 0. He's been really good down the field here for the Falcons. They had a good game the first time. And the Mark Andrews, look, he's back in my trust area here, so that's it. And then I have Dalton Kincald, and I wanted to bring up that was a tough debate. I had Dalton Kincald and Cade Otton and David Njoku. That's very interesting because Seattle made a trade, and this could actually change the fortunes of Kincald and Sam Laporta this week, because you had a trade of Ernest Jones. Now, that may not be a big name, but he's a good cover linebacker. So I might actually feel a little bit less on Kincald and a little bit more on Sam Laporta, but it's Kincald. They got him going. I think having Amari Cooper and now Keon Coleman stretching the field help. And then Cade Otton, I have ahead of Njoku because he is the passing game, and you can throw against the Falcons on the tight end.
You say they got Kincald going. He finishes a tight end 19 last week.
Okay.
The last 4 weeks, he's been the tight end 15, 26, 14, and 19. So I have him ranked, I feel, very appropriately at tight end 16.
I know. I don't like this move.
You have Kincald over David Njoku. I think that's crazy. I don't care who they're playing. Kincald just hasn't been involved. He has 1 touchdown all year long. Like, I don't.
I think it's coming, though. I think it's coming because I think just having that Cooper establishment now, and he also played a lot more. When I said not necessarily went off, but I think there were signs that they're going to use him a lot more last week because he hasn't been on the field a lot. I mean, they've been really head scratching, but I don't know. I don't know if I could ever put David Njoku ahead of Kincald because of the talent, but you might win this one this week, especially after that little sneaky Seahawks trade.
Yeah, we might have to put a bet on that one. Something, some like beer chugging bet or mayonnaise bet or something. I don't know. We'll figure it out. Another guy I'm higher on is Tucker Kraft, but it's like you said, it could be a total wide receiver game there. So I get why you have him down at 12. The difference between 6 and 12 at tight end is, do you get the touchdown or not, right? And Tucker Kraft has been coming down with touchdowns as of late. So has scored a touchdown in 3 of the last 4 games. So I'm willing to bet he could get the touchdown. That's why I have him there. And then another big name we have to discuss, because Dalton Kincald is going early in drafts, not as early as Sam Laporta, who we're going to discuss right now. He was going as tight end 1 off the board. We both have him ranked as our tight end 15 this week. Now, I grabbed your rankings before the Jameson Williams news of the suspension. Have you moved him up after the Jameson Williams news? Or are you keeping him at tight end 15 against Titans?
Well, I said Ernest Jones was on the Titans, so this helps a little bit, but I don't know if that's like a game changer, right? Like, he's not an elite linebacker by any means, but I think the Seahawks did recognize they were not very good in tight end coverage, and the Titans were the number 1 team against the tight end. So when you take away a cover man who does that, you do think that there would be a better chance. But I need to see more of Sam Laporta. He's also not scoring, right? And his volume has been very low. Like, he's very dependent on big plays, weirdly, like to get his production, where he was like consistently involved. So we'll see. But we've also seen this before, right? Where Jameson Williams, though, they should pivot, and they don't as much. They kind of get Khalif Raymond involved or get Jahmyr Gibbs out of the backfield. So I don't know. I don't know what it is, what they mixed up with the offense. Maybe Laporta was just their default guy last year because they needed him. I don't know. But I also think the connection's a little bit off, and I'm a little also worried about the passing volume in this game, as the Lions are almost 12-point favorites in this one.
Yeah, I mean, his usage is mind-boggling. The last 5 games, he's played 3 targets, 2 targets, 4 targets. Great. I mean, I guess for him, 1 target, 2 targets. Sam Laporta getting 1 or 2 targets in a game is insane to me. I think he's way too talented. Hopefully he's used more. Hopefully, again, this is a reverse jinx. I would love him to be better. I mean, life is just better when Sam Laporta is better at fantasy. but he is making me very nervous. I was with you with the Mark Andrews coming back. I have him ranked as tight end 9. I'm with you with Kyle Pitts. He's been a really solid tight end lately. I have him at tight end 8. Evan Ingram, you love him this week. You already mentioned that tight end 4. I have him at 7. So we pretty much agree there. Another guy, your boy, K. Dotton. You have him at number 9 this week. I like that. I have him at 12.
Yeah.
Just because of all these guys we just mentioned. But I still really like him this week. I think 10 targets last week. He's going to be a necessity, right, in this offense without Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. So I think he's a super solid play moving forward, actually, until Evans gets back.
Yeah, and you have to totally like do a little eye roll when you see somebody get 100 yards, a tight end that isn't Travis Kelce or George Kittle, right? You're always like, who's this guy? What did he do? So he has the talent to do some things here, and I get, and this is why you like David Njoku, because he's facing that same exact Ravens defense here with a wide receiver deficient team. So there is a parallel to say that Njoku can be pretty solid. I am now feeling bad about Kincald versus Njoku, but we'll see how it plays out. Maybe Kincald will score a 40-yard touchdown, and it'll all be good, and we'll all be happy. We just want, in the end, we just want all these guys to produce. So you'll all have tight ends that are good this week. And finally, end this question mark of, oh, is this a down year for tight ends?
Yeah. Well, let's say you're really desperate right now and your tight end position is just terrible and you have to pick from the waivers. Which guy would you go with? You got Will Disley against the Saints. Disley just had his best game of the season by far. I mean, he wasn't doing anything before last week. 11 targets, 8 receptions, 81 yards. Came out of nowhere. But the Saints are also just their defensive, like, I don't know, given up or something. And then Zach Ertz against the Bears. Ertz has been involved in this Commanders offense, but Jaden Daniels has now missed 2 straight practices. Come on, Daniels, we need you to play. Or Jontavian Sanders against the Broncos, but Bryce Young is starting instead of Andy Dalton because Dalton got into a car accident and is dealing with a sprained finger or thumb. Which of these 3 are you going with?
Yeah, all these variables just to make my head hurt, right? The Chargers have these injuries at wide receivers. Quentin Johnson going to be back, and they were randomly throwing to Stone Smart as well at tight end. So they were tight end by committee in that game because they were desperate to get anyone to make big plays against the Cardinals downfield, and they did get some of those. So I really can't trust Will Disley. I can't. I mean, like I said, he was a blip on their radar before that game, and I think again, this Chargers should get back to winning and playing in front and not having to have Justin Herbert throw for 330 yards, the emptiest 330 yards he could ever have, just like throwing up the tight ends and not really having 20 points or more. It's very strange when you throw for that many yards and not have 20 points. So going away from this, no Will Disley. I'm not dissing him, but I just don't like him at all. And Zach Ertz looked tough matchup against the Bears. I mean, especially it's looking very dicey for Jaden Daniels. It really comes down to Friday if they can get him on the field. And look, Ertz did produce Marcus Mariota. I just don't like Mariota navigating a much tougher matchup than he had last week. So I have to go with Jontavian Sanders. Now, I think they established him as a big part of what they were doing in the passing game. And Deontay Johnson and these wideouts are dead, right? Against the corners of the Broncos, Surtain should return from his concussion. So it's all over. They're not going to be able to get anything downfield. It's going to have to be a lot of dump offs to Chuba Hubbard and Sanders. So look, it may not be pretty, but we're hoping for some garbage time. And hopefully that's a rookie connection like Bryce Young. Hopefully he's learned something on the bench and seen how to operate. So I'm going with that. I know you especially like Sanders coming in this year. So I think he's starting to live up to that athletic receiver expectations.
I mean, he's a great talent. I loved him so much with the Longhorns. He was just absolutely amazing. So yeah, I was excited. I was shocked he fell to the 4th round, but the last 2 weeks, tight end 16, tight end 12. I mean, that's not great. But for a 4th round rookie in a bad offense, finally just getting underway. He's had 7 and 6 targets over the last 2 weeks, 5, 6 receptions, 49, 61 receiving yards, like getting more involved. We'll see if Bryce Young can move this team down the field whatsoever. Probably not. But if you're desperate, I'm with you. I think Sanders is a way to go out of this group, unless Jaden Daniels does play. And then I'd go with Zach Ertz just because he's safer. And then Will Disley last because it was really one game. He came out of nowhere. I can't trust that just yet. That is it for today's episode. Thank you to you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. If you could all go hit that subscribe button on YouTube, that'd be greatly appreciated. Also, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcast. That will help us grow as well, so we can keep coming here every day trying to get you that trophy. We would super appreciate it. Thank you all. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye, y'all.